Hi, you've reached the Signal Watch. Film, comics, television, sci-fi, superheroes, noir, history, and more. Join us as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hi, and welcome back. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today, I have a new contributor.
I'm Laura Maxwell Scott.
Hi, Laura Maxwell Scott.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Do you like our luxurious recording studio?
It is so luxurious, and I'm having the time of my life hanging out here in this amazing studio. And I really appreciate Jamie, who is currently wrangling the dogs.
So we went to high school together.
That's right. I am very qualified for this particular podcast because...
Yeah. We weren't the same year.
No.
But that is one qualification. Would you like to talk a little bit about what you do during your 9 to 5 hours? I
currently work as a talent agent here in town, and previous to that, after I went to high school, I went to UT, and then I moved to New York for 10 years where I became a casting director. And then I moved back, and now I work as a talent agent.
Who is your least exciting client?
I am not answering that question. Ryan Steens! This is not okay.
Who is your most exciting client?
I'm not answering that question either.
Who gives you the most problems?
No. What?
What's the most exciting?
All my clients are fantastic and you should hire them. And from time to time I might mention them in the podcast just to be annoying.
Are they in this project?
No. Nobody's in this project, I don't think. However, I do have connections to both the projects.
Okay,
so
great.
As we go through, we'll talk about that.
That is exciting. This is breaking news for me. So, yeah, we actually were in high school drama together.
That's
briefly.
Right.
I was a senior when you were a sophomore, and I used to occasionally drive Laura home.
That's right.
So she knows my gritty high school side.
That's right. The very, very gritty, super noir Ryan from high school. So
we are talking today about high school movies. It is, I mentioned, my 25th graduation reunion anniversary, whatever date. I don't think there's actually a reunion for class of 93, but here we are. And we were having a conversation where we were talking about high school movies, and do any of them actually reflect the high school experience?
We decided no, they do not.
Right.
I mean, not ultimately. A lot of things come close in a lot of different ways, and some of them more obscurely, but everything kind of misses the mark at the end of the day and doesn't feel like, okay, that's not exactly my experience, right?
Right. And it's interesting because in the United States, at least, we kind of have a somewhat similar high school experience. Everybody has to get up and go whether they like it or not.
Right.
And everybody is kind of thinks they're more mature maybe than they actually are.
Yes, I would agree with that.
It's also kind of you're being handed trust for the first time.
Mm-hmm. You're starting to figure out who you are for the first time, I think, too, right? Like coming into you're starting to see the glimmer of who you will be as an adult, but you are definitely not an adult yet.
And I think you're also old enough to get in trouble.
Yes, that's true too.
And you start making decisions, and it's, I think, a period you remember better than elementary or middle school, maybe even better than college, because college is so crazy and busy. It's so kind of repetitive.
Maybe.
I think you kind of dig those grooves in a way that I'm not sure I did in college.
I don't know if that was the same experience for me, but what I will say is, like, everyone's college experience, I think, probably varies in a way that maybe their high school experience doesn't.
That's absolutely true.
So like
your experience going through even drama versus me in film and history.
Absolutely. It's just a different... It's more singular or differentiated. Mm-hmm. And where you go to school, did you go to a big state school? Did you go to a small liberal? All that thing that can contribute to, like, a different experience.
And I think it's interesting that you kind of watch movie after movie, and there's always kind of, I mean, I think this was very true when we were growing up. I don't know if it's still true when you watch high school movies as much, but there's kind of the tribes and cliques that are somewhat actually representative of something.
Right. Yeah, and you sort of outgrow that to some degree once you graduate high school, but then sadly also you don't, or like, I think we're in a period of time where we like sort of realize that maybe some people we thought we left behind in high school are now running everything, which is kind of horrifying. But yeah, and you look, I also think like this is also coming from, like, we are both white people. Like, we both grew up in the same neighborhood. We both had a public school experience of a certain type. And there are a lot of movies that get made that sort of are about that experience. But also, some people go to, like, boarding schools. Some people go to private schools. Some people have very different high school experiences. And that is not necessarily what these movies are capturing, or what a bulk of these movies that get made for privileged people who get to see their lives told on screen.
Yeah, to give you some context, our high school had an indoor pool with a high dive.
Oh, I forgot it had a high dive.
That was always my marker because I didn't move to that school till my sophomore year.
Right.
And when I was touring this school, could not
get over it.
Yeah, like there's an indoor pool with a high dive.
And we grew up in a really suburban area that was sort of it was on the, I mean, can we just sort of, I'm not going to name the school necessarily, but like we grew up outside of Houston. It was like outside of a major urban area, so we had access to all these museums and culture and all this sorts of stuff. But we were in the suburbs and sort of on the edge where it was becoming, like, our actual high school was in the middle of a cow field. Mm-hmm. So there was like a little bit of a rural feel, but it was very suburban, and now is even more so. Like, there used to be like woods and stuff, and now it's all I don't know, strip malls. Yeah.
Well, we also had a full auditorium for our access for band, but really for drama. That's kind of where you and I lived through high school, which most schools, I mean, the school I'd left, and in fact, the school your husband went to.
Yeah, it did not.
It was the cafeteria where you were putting on your plays.
That's right. And so, yeah, that was super. I mean, that's not something everybody has. And we had a lot of facilities that, like, it was a nice school with a lot of great fine arts and arts facilities.
Our sports teams were garbage. They were incredibly bad.
I sort of remember that being true.
My junior year, sophomore year, the basketball JV team went 1-21.
Oh, but how was the lacrosse team?
It ended up breaking up, but yeah.
Well, at least you had a lot of fun.
Yeah, bloody noses and a lot of fun.
That's good. But it was not for lack of resources.
Not for lack of resources.
So we had a certain high school experience that I think a lot of these films, and we could get back into. I would love to come back and talk about other high school films, because I think there's other things we're not going to get to.
We've actually chosen, I think, somewhat intentionally to forego the John Hughes route.
Yes, at least for this particular podcast.
Right.
Molly Ringwald did a really good job of retreading that.
Yeah, if you haven't read the article, I can't remember, was it in the...
I think it was the New Yorker?
Yeah, it must have been, because I was going to say the New Yorker. Seek it out. It's interesting reading. But yeah, I don't think Grease looks like anybody's high school. If it is, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, that would have been
Except that
fun.
Your promise of to be together forever and ever is creepy.
And also, like, I'm not sure exactly, like, and also, your car flies right in the sky at the end. Spoiler alert. I don't know. There's something weird about that high school, but
yeah, and the whole carnival at graduation. I don't think we had a moon bounce.
No.
So our pitch to each other was, let's pick a movie that somehow, at least spiritually, reflects our high school experience. Right. We kind of went back and forth on who was going to start.
I think it's you.
I think it's me. I started watching the movie after saying, yeah, I'm picking this one, and immediately regretted it.
Which I don't think you should.
Okay. I picked Brick from 2005. If you have not seen the movie, pause now, go watch it, and then come back.
Because we're going to get way spoilery.
Yeah, we're going to get pretty spoilery. It is a film noir set in a high school with lots of kind of Chandler-esque and Hammett-esque sort of touches. I'd say it leans more on Raymond Chandler than Hammett, and hits all the familiar beats. But our detective is a senior in high school, not actually a detective, who is the film opens on him looking at the body of a young woman in a shallow creek outside of kind of a drainage ditch and drainage tunnel, rather. I'm not good at summing up plots when I'm just talking. Okay. Anyway, so
it opens there. We have a mystery.
Who done it? And you find out, this was a girl he'd formerly dated. He'd been out of the picture for a few months. They never really quite clear up how. But somehow she fell in with the wrong crowd, right. And now
it starts with this flash forward, and then we immediately flash back to the events before she's died, and we're given these. Also, we're immediately in this world where they're speaking a very noir language. Mm-hmm. So from the get-go, this is not your typical. This isn't Grease, although right. Grease they sing, so at least But this is something different.
Yeah, it's got femme fatales, it's got heavies, it's got the kind of criminal kingpin kind of running things behind the scenes, and all from a kind of 16-year-old to 26-year-old sort of perspective. Right. Of they talk about this mysterious drug lord is really old. He's 26 or something like that. And they do these flourishes in this dead serious movie occasionally where you're like, oh, they're kidding.
Right. There's a couple of nods, but they're pretty, they're really great when they come, but they're kind of spaced far enough apart.
Did you pick up on who played the vice principal?
Yes, and I love it so much, and I'm sorry I just yelled into your mic because
no, it's fine.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Richard Roundtree plays the assistant VP because it's so good. There's a scene, I don't know, we're jumping way ahead, but he gets pulled into, our detective, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, gets pulled into what would be the assistant DA's office, I think, but it's the assistant principal's office, and their back and forth is very noir, good.
It feels torn. That's the part that I was like, I think they just took this right out of Lady in the Lake or something. It's just torn right from that I'm not going to give the cops too much information, right. And I'm trying to play all the angles and play all the sides.
And of course he's Shaft.
Right.
But, just a great actor in a sort of cameo role there, but so good.
Yes. And we mentioned Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays our lead. It's kind of his big breakout, directed by Rian Johnson, who, of course, they go on together to go do Looper. Rian Johnson's filmography is really weird and short and immediately leads to a Star Wars.
I know, I was going to say, then he directed another little indie called The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
But this was his first film. He wrote it. It took him 10 years to get it made. Finally, he made it himself. His family funded it or helped him fund it. And he went back to his high school to shoot it, which I think is interesting because we're going to talk about another movie later. But that idea of going back to the place that you went to high school, to where it all started. And I think for him too, also it was the town that he lived in. I think he knew all the locations. So if they had to make a quick location change, they could. He knew there would be a drainage pipe there that he could put a body in. So that was the reasoning for that. But I think that's sort of interesting. That even though there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in this movie that is not all like my high school experience, there was this real tangible place that he clearly knew well that all these crazy things were happening in.
So I did pick this movie, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with anything that happened to me in high school.
It doesn't? That's relief.
There were no murders that I'm telling anyone about.
You didn't walk up on a girl in a drainage ditch? Or
No. That was college. But I kid.
Okay.
But I did see two dead people in college. The reason I picked this movie was I found it really interesting that if you really start thinking back about high school, there's a lot of things that occur, especially outside of class, that have you're not talking to anyone in authority about what's going on. And to some extent, the people who work around high schoolers all the time enter into these quasi mature relationships with these students. They know at the end of the day they're held responsible to adult rules, but the kids aren't. Kids kind of operate in this twilight zone of getting into trouble, like we talked about,
Right.
of that's when you start having sexual experimentation and drugs experimentation and drinking and doing a bunch of stuff that you're trying to get away with everything you kind of can. And I don't think you're trying to do it under the line when you're 18 so you don't actually get in trouble, but I think that ends up being kind of a de facto thing that occurs. You kind of have your own patois, between each other that you lose as soon as you kind of enter the real working world. And I also think that it's kind of the idea of him going kind of to the mat for this girlfriend in the kind of this, in his own head, maybe, very chivalrous, this thing he's got to do. That's, despite the fact it's such a trope in noir and other things, it's also kind of a high schoolery sort of thing of
Take on...
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a ton of misogyny in this movie, in this film. Like, I mean, it definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test. But beyond that, like, again, huge spoiler, but I mean, you find out that the girl who was killed was pregnant, and it may be this other femme fatale has convinced this other guy to kill her because she's told him that it's his child, and he's maybe convinced that it's not his child, but also maybe kills her because he's convinced that it is. Which is really terrible, but also maybe not indicative of how high school can be. I mean, there's a lot of that terribleness in the high school experience, or can be.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah. But anyway, that was more or less why I picked it. I did think it was also interesting of how they kind of set up the different kind of cliques and how people could kind of pass between them, how this character in particular was kind of like, if I cross the parking lot, I'm now, that's where all the jocks are.
Right.
And I'm going to sneak into this kind of they say upper crust for the
rich people
the
party.
rich people popular kids party, where of course we have our femme fatale and
he can also drop off at the drama department.
Yeah.
Which is the only classroom we see in the entire film. Nobody in this movie goes to class.
No, you never. Yeah. Do you see another class? I don't.
You
think
see
you
the
did.
library.
Yeah.
You never see the cafeteria, but it's very important where people eat lunch.
Yes.
It's a very big thing.
Yeah. Wow. You've been eating lunch behind the school.
That's right.
Yeah.
You think nobody sees you, but I seen you eat behind the portables. It's good. There's some good lines about eating lunch. Where you been eating lunch these days? Lunch is complicated. Lunch is a lot of things. But yeah, it's a big deal where you eat lunch. It's a big deal. So you just sort of talk about all these cliques. Yeah.
Honestly, that was part of what I found, in anyone's day in high school. It's not something you do, really. I mean, you kind of go to work and you have your work people, and when you're an adult, and then you go home and you're with your home people, and you have your family. But those are all kind of these different, maybe the three spheres that you kind of crisscross. Where in high school, it's like you walk across the parking lot.
You're a whole new world.
Yeah. And
you're in Jockland now.
Yeah, you're in Jockland. And to some extent, I moved to a new high school my sophomore year. Didn't really have a lot of the definitions of the people who'd been all together all growing up.
Right.
Kind of gotten slotted or whatever.
Right.
And I don't know how much people were actually that slotted if you kind of get down to it. But I also find, by the way, the whole like jocks picking on nerds thing like utterly baffling, because that did not happen at our high school. Like, I'm always just utterly baffled by putting people in lockers and wedgies and all that.
Right.
Like that.
I think some bullying definitely happened, but I don't know that it would have been exactly across those lines.
Right.
And I think you're
It was
you're also 6'3", 4, 5. Nobody was putting Reinstein's in a locker.
No one put baby in a corner.
Those lockers are way too small to fit anybody in them.
Nor was I in a trombone slot. Yeah, I was a big kid. But yeah, but I do remember kind of crossing through those different social groups,
right,
like on an hour by hour basis.
Right.
Now I'm talking to the football players. Now I'm in drama. Now I'm hanging out with some kids who have some issues.
Right.
And everybody ends up we don't all end up fine. Some people are not fine from high school, but that was something that I kind of understood. I also kind of got my head a little bit into To me, everything in high school felt a bit like a mystery to be solved. I wouldn't say in exactly in a noir-esque sort of way, but it was me constantly trying to puzzle out what was going on, because there was some weird stuff going on sometimes between students, between what was going on with between sometimes adults and students.
Right, sure.
And there were, about these things going on, and about things people are doing that they shouldn't be doing, and you never ever talk about it.
Yes, and you have to just sort of make sense about I think the time when you're making sense about the world around you in a bigger way, and also finding out that your family isn't like everyone else's family, I think to some degree, a lot of people carry different problems with them, but those problems differ, and it's sometimes surprising to figure out what those problems are. So yeah, and then just trying to make sense of the world around you, and you have a lot going on in your brain. So
yeah, I'm very glad I did not see this in high school.
Yeah,
I think you would have seen me trying to be sulky Joseph Gordon-Levitt for the rest of my high school period. But I do think it has, some truth to it. I think it's fun to see it through the lens of noir, kind of in this, it's a dark movie.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's not. But every once in a while you take that step back and go, they're talking about lunch.
Right. Yeah. It definitely captures, I think, how seriously you take yourself when you're in high school. Mm-hmm. And it's overly serious, and nobody died, generally. Nobody was murdered in some huge scandal where everybody was in on it, and we're all selling bricks of drugs, and that I was aware of. I was not in that clique, but yeah, I mean, everything feels so serious. Everything to me felt so serious in high school.
Yeah, everything was life or death.
Yeah. So,
and that's, I think, what it kind of captured was, how, but when you're talking to your parents now, you look back, go, man, I must have sounded like a lunatic.
Yeah. Yeah, we did sound like a lunatic. There's some things that I really love about this movie, speaking of the sort of the lens moving, mm-hmm. and I think, one, it does a really nice job with just the mystery. You get these sort of words, and you're trying to figure out what they mean, and you don't know in the beginning, and then it all sort of comes together. But also, when you finally get to the Kingpin's house, who's played by Lucas Haas, which is great, and he has this cane with a duck head on it, which is so delicious. And also there's this whole idea of the whole movie that it's all the upper crust, but then you get to his house and it's not a cool house, and wood paneled basement, and but then you go upstairs and meet his mother, and they're having this very serious business meeting, and she's like, do you want the country style orange juice? And there's this pitcher on the table, this rooster pitcher.
Oh, the rooster
most
pitcher.
Delicious pitcher. It's so funny. And you're just there's this super serious thing happening, but it's just the camera pulls back, and it's another one of those winks where you're just this is amazing. And then I just want to appreciate, again, there's just some really excellent lines in this movie. So yeah. It's worth it to watch, I think, for that.
Yeah. I think when the Tug character, I would say is kind of over the top,
yeah,
even for this movie. But then I kind of remember living...
Good guys sort of were like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember getting chased for absolutely no reason driving down the road because I was a teenager, and there was some dude who was just like that, who was suddenly going to kick my ass,
right,
on 1960.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's definitely stuff that happened. And I did love the scene where they're in the parking lot and he sees the Tug's car and he's going to mess it up. And then just that whole, there's a whole back and forth, and he puts our hero puts his glasses in his pocket because he knows he's about to get punched. And just, there's a lot of really good action there. I have to say, I love, the drama department is nuts. I have no idea what play they're doing. At one point, she's and it just gets progressively more weird. Like like at first she's sort of in normal clothes, and then she's like in a ballet tutu, and then she's wearing like a Fosse outfit, and then like by the end she's in like full kabuki makeup. Like, we don't know.
So I am not sure. I don't think this is true. But the only thing I could compare it to is the like 1982 movie Once Upon a Time in America, where they at the end confront the Deborah character, who's now an adult, who they've had to age up, but they don't want to show her, and and it's this big reveal moment, and she's now a Broadway actress,
right.
And she's in full white makeup, like ready to do that. And I have always wondered, because I couldn't tell if the glasses thing was actually not a nod to Tom's hat in Miller's Crossing, or if that's just like we're doing these noir things.
Right.
And Once Upon a Time in America is a mobster movie, but it's got some noir elements. I don't think necessarily that's what it was, but you're right. Like that woman, well, she's a woman now.
Yeah, she is. It's Megan Good.
And an amazing filmography.
She's amazing. Actually, there's a lot. We'll take a second to talk about casting in just a little bit, but I will say, so she went on to do Minority Report, and my client Zane Hall played her son in Minority Report, and that is my connection to this film. Moving on.
Okay.
And Zane Hall is available for hire. Moving on.
Does he do bar mitzvahs?
No, probably not. But you should definitely put him make him a series regular in your upcoming whatever you're shooting next.
Excellent. I will get right on that with my next major project.
Excellent.
But yeah, she's great, and the kind of back and forth they have is kind of the ex-love interest he does not care about anymore. Right. Who he has kind of realized is this great information source, but kind of
she's trouble.
Oh yeah. In the femme fatale in the movie, she plays it pretty much. I mean, if you go back and watch Marie Astor in Maltese Falcon, I really think that is what Rian Johnson must have shown her. Like, you're seeming like you're all innocent,
right?
But what are you really up to? And he knows your trouble, and he's just trying to figure it out,
right? And she's delightful, and she's gone on to do a lot of really excellent things as well. Many people in this film have. I do think casting director did it's Shannon McClanahan. I do not know, or am I saying that right? McClanahan. I'm so sorry, Shannon, if I'm saying your name wrong. But
you're dead to Shannon.
I know. I don't know her personally, and now I never will. But she did a really good job. Because I think Emily Dravin. This came out in 2005, but I think it was shot in 2003 before Lost.
Oh.
And she plays Laura. No, she doesn't play Laura. Laura is our femme fatale. She plays,
which of course
Emily.
Is another noir nod. Just so you know.
Just so you know. Emily plays Emily who dies. But she went on to do Lost.
Who was she in Lost?
She had the baby.
Oh,
Claire.
I haven't really thought about Lost since this end of the 6th season. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm casting director, so
no, I know.
I'm missing some of the things, but
yeah,
it's what I do. But yeah, and then Ryan's gone on to work with a bunch of these actors and other things as well, obviously. And we didn't talk about Dodie yet, who is like the burnout at the Coffee and Pie Oh My place, which is, I think he's also done some other movies with our director, Ryan.
Has he?
Johnson. I think so. I think he's in Looper.
I only saw that once and it was really good. Now I'm really wanting to watch Looper tonight.
Okay. Anyway, it's a really good cast, and I think a lot of the cast is very. I mean, Joseph Gordon-Levitt would have been a name to tell.
Oh yeah, he'd been on Third Rock.
He'd been doing stuff for a while, but I think even though this movie came out when some of these other people had credits, I mean, obviously like Richard Roundtree, but it's like. It's a good cast of young people that are starting their careers that did go on to have like really great careers.
Oh. You had chosen a very different movie.
I did.
I would say this one is far more grounded in reality.
Yes.
And you picked?
I picked Lady Bird. Oh, sorry.
No.
Let's just do that whole thing again.
3. So you have selected...
I selected Lady Bird. which came out in 2017, most recent Oscar and award season, Darling, directed by Greta Gerwig. This is her first solo writing, directing gig. She co-directed some other stuff in the past, and she wrote on Frances Ha, but this is her first movie where she went back and did that. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of things. There's a lot of things in this movie that weren't my growing up experience, but when I think about what comes the closest to like what was high school really like, especially the awkwardness, this was the movie that when I thought of it, I was like, oh yeah, that's the one that's probably comes the closest.
I think it's worth pointing out, like we said at the beginning here, we weren't going to do John Hughes, right? And I think John Hughes movies are kind of these, well-polished machines.
Right.
And there's things that are like, oh, it's, so embarrassing that my grandma did this, and it's like, wah, wah, This doesn't have that feeling.
No, it's not nearly as polished. And the whole timing of it, there's a lot of the pacing of it. There's not like a very clear wrap up at the end. Like the first time I saw it in the theaters, even though like you sort of feel like there's a resolution coming, but I was not ready for the lights to come up because I was just like, okay, that's it. That's the end of the movie, which I loved the end of the movie, but yeah, it's very tender with the characters in a way, but like also very real with them, and I think even down to the pacing and the polish or unpolishedness of it. Mm-hmm. I like the John Hughes movies. I know they're problematic, and I need to probably rewatch them and remember how problematic they are. But they deal with like difficult issues. But yeah, I really appreciated the care that she sort of dealt with all of the characters in the film. And as a parent, like I relate to it as a daughter who grew up in a certain white lady woman who grew up in a certain time period, and then I relate to it as a parent of daughters. I think it's something that like the adults in the movie are also really fleshed out, and the cast is amazing. It's Saoirse Ronan, who plays Lady Bird, Laurie Metcalf, who is probably best known for Roseanne, but has done like a ton of Chicago theater work. Tracy Letts plays her dad. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. He's married to the impeccable Carrie Coon, and he's so great in this. And his performance is like much more subtle, I feel like. But and I understand why it wasn't like a breakout sort of award nominated performance, but he's just really lovely, I think, as the dad. He has some good moments. Beanie Feldstein is her best friend, Julie, Jonah Hill's sister.
Are you serious?
I'm so serious.
She was great.
She's really great in the movie, and she's in Hello, Dolly, or was in Hello, Dolly. Yes.
With Babs.
Yeah. The Lucas Hedges is Danny, who we love. Timothy Chalamet is Kyle, who we hate a little bit but also love, who is also in Call Me By Your Name this award season. Did you see Call Me By Your Name? No. Do
I see anything that doesn't have a robot or monkey in it? No.
Or a sea monster.
Yeah.
You see sea monster movies. Okay, well, we'll get there, but I loved that he was in this movie and the role he played in this movie versus the role he plays in Call Me By Your Name. Lois Smith plays the nun.
I know. That was crazy.
I love her so much. What were you going to...
No, I was like, I know her. And then I IMDb'd it this morning, and I was like, oh, that was Lois Smith. Of course. But she's in a habit. And, yeah.
Stephen Henderson, who's also done a ton of theater, was in Fences. He is the first theater director. Love him a lot too. Maybe if we get into plot a little bit, we'll talk about that. And then I'm not as familiar. Like Miguel was Jordan Rodriguez, and Mariel Scott played Shelley. Who Miguel is? We assume they never explain it, but Lady Bird's older brother, who we think is probably adopted, and then his girlfriend, his live-in girlfriend, Shelley, that her mom is allowed to just... So yeah, the movie was originally called Mothers and Daughters. That's probably one of the parts I relate to the most. The relationship between Lady Bird and her mother is very fraught in this film, but I think very truthful, and it sort of opens with them sleeping in the same bed. They've been going to like a college trip. Her mom makes the bed at the hotel, even though they're not going to. Like they're like, housekeeping is coming, but like she has come from a different circumstance. I think it's sort of explained in the film. Like I think she's in a new class where she's holding on for dear life to like middle class, the mother, and it's like a lot about what appearances are. And then there's this amazing first scene where they're driving in the car and they're listening to the Grapes of Wrath, and they're both weeping. They both sort of look at each other, but not at the same time. And then Grapes of Wrath ends. They immediately start fighting because Lady Bird is basically an ungrateful, like she just starts complaining about everything, like, why can't I live through anything interesting, even though 9/11 has apparently just happened.
Yeah, they're on the verge of the Iraq
right, like
invasion.
There's a lot happening, but she's like, why can't I live through anything? And then it just it's clearly an old argument that's just that they have been having for probably years and are going to have through the rest of this film. And then it concludes with Lady Bird jumping out of the car
at like 50 miles
at like 50 miles per hour, which is an amazing punchline. And then you see her getting her cast that says, I'm sorry, it says "fuck you, mom," which is great. And then you start to see her life, and she goes to this Catholic high school. I was raised Catholic, but I obviously didn't go to Catholic high school. And she has her best friend Julie. She's trying to find her way. There is, again, all these like 9/11. You hear them do like the Hail Mary and like the Pledge of Allegiance and all that stuff that you do in high school. Not the Hail Mary, but there's like the Never Forget in construction paper on the side, and then the other like. There's a couple of references to terrorism throughout the film because Lady Bird wants to go to college on the East Coast. She wants to. This is also what I relate to. Like, she wants to get out of her hometown, and she wants to go away to college. Everyone's like, but terrorism.
Yeah.
and Julie's like, but what about terrorism? And she's like, don't be a Republican. So that's one main struggle. She's trying to figure out who she is. One thing I felt about the movie, like, it is like a slice of senior year of high school, but some of this felt like very much like, I was like, how could you be a senior and still be figuring this stuff out? Like, some of it I was like, wouldn't you be like a sophomore and figuring that out? Like, how, like, I know they sort of address it, but like, how does she get to be a senior, and how does that kid, Lady Bird, who's like run for every single office every single time and makes these amazing posters, like, not know that there's a drama program? Like first day. Sorry, Greta, that's my one complaint with the film.
But I mean, I think that's part of her. I mean, if I'm going to defend something, I have no reason to defend. She's so tuned out. I mean, she's tuned out to what's.
She's in her own world, right?
Yeah,
that's fair. Like, she's very about wants to do Math Olympiad, even though she's terrible at math.
I mean, I think it's probably arguable that people had no idea we were doing plays at Klein Oak.
I mean, really?
Yes.
Like, they would have to go during English class and watch part of the play, though.
I think they probably remembered it then, but did they remember when
the rest of the year?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of one thing if it's right in your face, but it's like, how many people knew about auditions? How many people...
Well, right. I could see. Like, maybe people were not that into, like, I'm going to go audition for that, or weren't keeping tabs on that.
Yeah. And how many people really knew were, the spring musical was occurring, those sorts of things. It's like, who was really in the audience? It was like parents and grandparents and best friends.
Okay.
We may not have been the stars we like to remember ourselves
this is
being.
Crushing reality. So...
but the drama experience was pretty spot on in the film. The exercises that you're doing, that you have no idea why you're doing them, and they don't really relate to anything at the end of the day, but you're doing them.
When you go around the circle and you're like, mana, yeah, I sort of get. Then I went to drama school and they taught us why we do all those things, so I think I sort of understand some of it now.
We read Meisner in high school.
Yeah.
They made us read it. I didn't really No,
You didn't really get it, or
I didn't care.
So yes, you have this drama teacher who does their first show. She goes and auditions for the musical. The audition for the musical is fantastic because they're all doing Sondheim. The show is Merrily We Roll Along, which when it went on, which was a show that was all kids when it was on Broadway, and it was like a huge failure and flop when it went on Broadway, but it has had a life after that, and you have all these kids doing like Sondheim songs, and then Julie, who gets the lead, does like "Make Me an Instrument of Your Peace." But there's this moment. This is when we first meet Danny, and he auditions for the musical, and he sings "Giants in the Sky," right? And there's like this moment which I related to when you like realize somebody is very talented. When you're just in the audience with your friend, and you're like, that person has so much talent. I am immediately in love with that person. Hold the presses. I can't breathe. And then you get this is also, you get this, the line that's in, I think, the trailer too, where she goes to audition and he's like, "Lady Bird, is that your given name?" She's like, "Yes. It's given to me by myself. I gave it to me. It's my given name." I don't even think that's the line, but it's a great line.
Well, I do want to stop and talk a little about the name because you've given me a segue to do so.
Okay.
I found this very interesting. I mean, it's the arc of the character.
Yeah.
Right? It's completely tied to it from kind of a how does she think of herself? She's trying to be her own person, and she's rejecting, the mom who's given her the name Christine, and at every opportunity, and it's played up as quirky at the beginning.
Right.
And the parents go along with it,
right? And they call her Lady Bird.
Mm-hmm. They're letting her be that, and not to spoil the ending, but to spoil the ending. She's introducing herself now in New York as Christine. Yeah. She's and then that's kind of sums up what the movie's about. I thought it was a really, really nice way to do that in a way that wasn't like turn on the floodlight and point at the points of the movie.
Right, but yeah, she embraces that part of herself. Of course, then she immediately, jumping to the end, tells this dude that she's from, like, she tells him at first she's from Sacramento, mm-hmm. but then she tells him that she is from San Francisco, which is just such a like, don't do that. You're from Sacramento. But so it's like she's embraced this thing, but then she's also sort of shedding this life. She still has to figure out who she is a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But you do get the feeling she's finally starting to put together and now on the streets of New York by herself after leaving the hospital at 5 a.m, kind of going, oh, that's what Mom was doing.
Right.
Maybe I'm not so good at this.
Right. Because you never figure out who you are and what you love and what you miss until you leave it, right? Like, especially as a kid, I think. Like, I never knew how much I loved Texas until I moved to New York. You just have to get some. I think, especially at that age when you're so wrapped up in yourself and you're so blind and stupid about so many things, you have to sort of figure out. It takes a little distance sometimes to figure that out.
But the mom and the daughter's relationship. Fraught. I mean, that's kind of what but not in a like abusive sort of way. It's I think in a fairly standard issue, white bread suburban sort of way, where there's a lot of passive aggressive behavior from the mom. There is two or three conversations that occur in this movie that, although I was not a daughter, I had with my mother.
Right.
Between. Do you actually like me?
Right.
And not necessarily getting a satisfying answer at that moment because maybe you're not the most likable human being on earth. Maybe you've been pushing everyone.
In that moment, or maybe your mother's trying to push you to be a little more or something.
Yeah. And the conversation about the worry about the job. Mm-hmm. And I think even to some extent, and this is a different subplot, but she makes all these new friends her senior year.
Yeah.
Which I kind of went through. I mean, I'd moved in my sophomore year, and I was kind of rotating through, I had my drama people, but I was also suddenly hanging out with other people my senior year as well. But at the same time, and this isn't to belittle anyone or anything, but I also kind of at the end of senior year was just kind of like, I'm not talking to any of you people, at this point. Like, this is driving me crazy, kind of straight up and down. And, you do kind of go back to, hey, we were friends this whole time.
Yeah.
And that was... I think that you see that actually pop up in weird things like Heathers and other movies.
Right.
And it's always more of like a safety net here, but this felt a lot more genuine. You kind of understood the character's motivation at that point a whole lot.
Yeah. Lady Bird, we have to go back and talk about Danny, but to jump ahead, Lady Bird spots Kyle in his band with floppy-haired reading Howard Zinn, Kyle, who rolls his own cigarettes. But
you all knew this guy in college. If you didn't know him in high school, you knew him in college. And he was,
or many Kyles.
Many.
Watch out for Kyle, the old floppy haired. He's in a band reading. Yes, yeah. But she. Something happens that we'll address, and she breaks up with Danny and she starts to pursue Kyle. So Kyle works at the coffee shop and Lady Bird works at the coffee shop, and they meet at the coffee shop, and she knows that he's friends. He mentions hanging out with the Deuce, so she drops her friend Julie to hang out with this other girl who has her own tanning bed in her house and is like on a whole other class level. And so that is not great behavior on Lady Bird's part. Like, she just completely drops her friend, sort of develops this whole other persona, lies, says she lives in a house that she doesn't live in, but becomes friends with this whole other set of people in order to meet and go out with and hang out with Kyle and go to parties where she might see him more often. I do love Julie, though, because it's not just the standard, like, best friendship in the movie. Like, she's, like, a real person. She has her own things going on. And eventually, like, at the end of the day, there's nothing there for Lady Bird with Kyle. Like he's this guy. She takes things way seriously. I think at the beginning, maybe he even remarks about it. But, like, eventually... she loses her virginity to him. She thinks that he is also a virgin. He is not. And he's just like, why do you care about this? This is not a big deal. Like, why are you taking all of this so seriously? You're going to have lots of meaningless sex in your life. Which I think is funny because in Call Me By Your Name, spoiler to that film, like, it's all about a coming of age story where a guy has, like, very meaningful sex, and, like, at the end is, like, very lovingly treated as he is having all the feelings about all of his experiences. But in this movie, he gets to play like this. Nothing matters. Like, why do you care? And before that, we have Danny, who she sees in the musical and falls in love with, and sort of her first love. I think I read Greta Gerwig also had a boyfriend that, like, they would frolic in that same rose garden or whatever. And Danny is gay, is the reveal. Mm-hmm. And they're having like a very Denny's-like-esque cast party. That's not when we had our cast parties at people's houses, but it did remind me of, like, us all. We would go, like, before the show, before preview day, like, in the morning, like at 5 a.m. to Denny's, and, like, I hope we weren't throwing fries at each other, but, like, I feel like we might have been.
I just remember being insanely tired.
Yeah, we were real tired a lot, and I do feel like there were definitely some shenanigans that happened in those adventures. And she decides she's going to go to the men's room because there's too long a line in the ladies' room, and sees her boyfriend kissing another man, which is not exactly an experience I had, but very close to some experiences that I had in high school. And I loved then later on, I loved how they handled it. Well, first of all, one of the things I love about the movie, that makes the movie for me, is them sitting in the car and listening to Crash. Mm-hmm. Because it is not cool. And, like, I love that they didn't use, like, a really cool song or, like, a song that would be considered cool by today's standards. It was not, we were sort of talking about this earlier, but it's not a contemporary song to the era. Like, it would have been a few years older by that point. But it feels very, like to me, it wouldn't have been Crash, although I liked that song in college, but, like, and I will admit that. But,
Get out.
But it would have been August and Everything After, like the Counting Crows, or like we all like to think, and maybe yes, some of us probably were listening to cool music.
I bought Hootie.
Yes, you did, and you had feelings about it. You paid money for that. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes, especially when we think about high school, like there's those memes that go around about like what albums you listen to in high school or whatever. Everyone has like the coolest albums, and I'm like, no, that's not what you're listening to in high school. I was in your car and I remember. It was some of that, but it was also like the Eagles' greatest hits. So
yeah,
let's be real. So I loved that a lot. And that
was always the weird thing, was getting the mixtape from someone of like what was important to them,
right?
And being like,
Well, and to skip ahead, but I mean, how real of a moment is that?
By the way, there's no mixtape moment in this movie.
No,
I'm just making that reference because
it's
that
like
is my memory of
high school and being in the But what the equivalent of the mixtape moment is at the end of the movie where she meets the guy at her. So they don't tell us, but I am like 99% sure this is NYU. It looks very much like the NYU dorm that I stayed in. I went to NYU for a summer. That was like my version of the compromise that Lady Bird's family makes. Like my parents were like, you are not going away to school. Like when we look at everything, this doesn't make any sense. You're going to go to state school. Mm-hmm. You're going to UT. But then I did get to go away for the summer and do something through NYU. But when the kid, when that other dude, he has a name, I don't remember what it is flipping through her CDs, that's like the mixtape moment.
Yeah.
Or like, you are now being judged for your taste in music.
But
and judged harshly.
She's very drunk, but he says, oh, you have so-and-so's greatest hits. Oh, and she's like, but they're the greatest hits.
So good. He's like, you have your music's so horrible. Like, there's all this is like greatest hits album. But they're the greatest.
Yeah. My roommate, my freshman year at UT, had legendarily mediocre taste. Uh-huh. And everyone knew it because every night he would blast Billy Joel's greatest hits. Oh. That was one of like 3 CDs.
Billy Joel has some good songs.
But it was that thing of like he was just stuck in a rut. He could only listen to that one double disc album.
Right.
And I lived with him, so I couldn't get away.
But was just Billy Joel all the time.
You'd be in the study lounge and people would be like, who is effing listening to Billy Joel again? And then I'd be like, it's my roommate. And I love this guy. I love this guy to this day.
Is he going to be on the pod?
Oh, my God. Oh, I would love to unleash the hounds and have him on the podcast. I doubt it. But he's a great guy. But he was very into Billy Joel at the time. Probably still is. If we were here right now, this would turn into 2 hours.
To a Billy Joel conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Danny, so poor Danny, to get back to poor Danny.
So Danny exists.
Danny is gay, mm-hmm. And later we see him, he comes to her coffee shop, and she's still, she's cried it out to Crash, but, she's still super cold to him. But there's that lovely scene where he's like, she's just like, what do you want from me? And he's like, just please don't tell anyone. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's like a feeling I remember having where it's just like, okay, like, I've been betrayed, like this person has cheated on me, and like obviously this is over. So then you have those feelings, but then you're also like, oh, like this person's struggle is like way bigger than my struggle. Yeah. Like especially, it's sad that even in 2003 that would have been a problem. It's still a problem today, and like is definitely a problem in the 90s when we went to high school. It's just like, oh, Danny, I love you. I want to give you a big hug. You got a rough road ahead, but you're gonna be okay. It gets better, Danny.
It gets better. Yeah, no, it was a very, very well handled, and I didn't think like soapboxy or like they had really contrived it in any way. It had an honesty to it,
right.
And yeah, It was a really good storyline.
And Danny, the other thing I love about Danny is he's so guileless, and he's constantly walking into these situations where he says things like, Lady Bird says that she lives on the wrong side of the tracks, but there's actual train tracks that, like, her mother then holds on to for, like, 2 months and will definitely come up in an argument later about college. Or, like, and then they become friends again after this whole thing, which is great. If there's one thing that I think is missing in this movie, like, we do see it a lot, but, like, a good, like, male friendship, like, in this, like, all the males are, like, romantic, and she goes to a girls' school, so, I mean, that makes sense, but, like, there's not, like, there's a really good female friendship romance, like, story here, but there's not, like, that sort of just male friends without these guys being, like, just dweebs, but everybody's kind of a dweeb, kind of doesn't have anything figured out in this movie.
I think you're right. I didn't really notice that, I guess, when I was watching the movie, but I also, maybe it was contextualizing of, well,
it's an all-girls school.
It's an all-girls school. Yeah.
They're not really talking to boys ever. The Danny at the end comes back in and is like, so what happened with the wait list? And her dad is just like, oh, no. But Danny's always doing stuff like that. Good old Danny. So we appreciate him for that. Just, don't tell him any secrets.
You told me how to pronounce her name before we started.
Oh, Saoirse Ronan.
Saoirse Ronan was really, really good.
Yeah.
She's Irish?
She is Irish.
That's unbelievable.
How would you guess?
But and there's not a hint of accent. I mean,
no.
she nails the kind of generic American.
She's a fantastic actress. I mean, I think because she's been on the scene since she was a kid. I think sort of one of those rare. She was in The Lovely Bones. She was in Brooklyn, right? But she did The Crucible in Broadway before she shot this. I think she's kind of one of those rare. I think she has, like, a really good family. She's kind of one of those rare young actresses that, like, she's very serious. She's incredibly talented, and she can absolutely do a Sacramento accent.
I can't say I know the Sacramento accent, but yeah,
she doesn't sound weirdly like she's from some other made-up place in America. Or
I have a favorite TV show that has an Irish actress on it who is trying to play an American, and it's not working.
Right.
So this is a hot button topic for me right now.
Yeah. Well, there's I won't mention names, but there's famously lots of actors who do not do the accent thing nearly as well as Saoirse Ronan is doing it in Lady Bird.
And it goes kind of beyond that. I mean, her performance of being able to kind of pass through I understand why this character is being a doof, but not playing it as, which is kind of where I would draw the line between, like, John Hughes versus, like, it's like, oh, it's Farmer Ted being Farmer Ted, right? He's a doof, but here it's all very natural. It's on the audience to get what is happening here, kind of through the lens of Laurie Metcalf and Saoirse.
I love when she goes up to Danny and, like, makes her first, like, foray. Like, speaking of noir, like, she walks up to Danny and tries to be like, she's in the grocery store and she's like, so, do you come here often? He's like, no idea what to do with this. And, like, she's constantly saying stuff like that to guys, like, I'm gonna kill, if you tell anybody I'm gonna kill your family, she says to Kyle. Like, Kyle's just like, oh, what? Or that's when she makes her like, when again she's trying to, like, flirt with Danny and she makes her like, I'm from the wrong side of the tracks. It's just like, what are you saying, Lady Bird?
Yeah, you're trying to use those things you've heard on TV and whatnot, and it's very, very hard to actually figure out how those things actually work.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely worth seeing. I'm not someone who normally. You got very upset with me when you found out I had not seen Boyhood, for example.
That's true, I did.
And it's just, I'm not going to say it's not in my wheelhouse. It's not something I often end up making time for in light of Robots and Apes. But, it can remind you that there are actually very, very good movies like this that are out there. It's not just Oscar bait or fodder.
Right.
We had a conversation prior to recording about did this earn, an Oscar?
So hard to quantify.
Yeah, it was a weird year. A movie about a swamp monster having sex with a mute lady won Best Picture. So anything can happen in 2018.
That's right. 2018 has been a rare year all around.
But it's a great movie. I would actually, even if you're mostly into the robots and James Bond or wherever you came to this podcast, I would say, hey,
go see it.
2 hours, that's all, and it's a great movie.
Yeah, I loved it a lot, and it's doing a lot of interesting things that not everyone else is doing. Oh, I didn't shout out. So the casting on this was done by Allison Jones, who also did who's done everything. She's a genius. She did The Office. She did Freaks and Geeks. A lot of good movies that are shows that I feel like are also capturing a sort of reality. She's done lots of things, but Jordan Thaler and Heidi Griffiths also did casting on this movie. I worked for them when I was in New York. In fact, I probably worked for them when this movie was set, and they are two of the finest people in show business. So I had to shout that out because I love them so much because they're amazing. Great. And that's my connection to this film. That's my two connections.
You don't have any kids in this one?
I don't have any kids in this one, no. It was shot in Sacramento, mostly a little bit in New York, and probably some in LA too. And I don't know what they used in New York for the dorm room, but I will say down to I was rewatching it and I was like, the windows totally looked like that. If they built that set and didn't shoot in a dorm, props to whoever built that set.
I'm sure. I mean, it was probably 2 days, 3 days of shooting. I'm sure they could get a dorm room
for that day, or get some area in that. And then the church I've been in that she goes to, I've been in exactly once. And again, speaking of specificity of place, I went. It was right before we moved back to Austin. It was a very big transitional time. Our friends invited us to go there for Easter. I had Sophie with me, who was a toddler, and she walks up the stairs, and I very clearly remember being on those stairs with little Sophie, and it's just weird, And then you have, and it was a transition period in my time. It's a transitional period in Lady Bird's time, and then of course she goes out, and she does this whole speech about driving in Sacramento, which. Did you drive around a lot in spring? I mean, do you have that sort of connection to a driving around?
If they made a movie that had been Drive,
but in high school, spring,
that would have been mine because cars. Yeah, that little speech really hit home with me because I remember when I got the keys to the '83 Honda Accord and I was 16. That was the other weird thing. Everybody in spring took driver's ed. When they turned 16, which I never understood because you can when you're 15.
Right.
So I'd spent a year driving under my parents' direction.
Right.
But suddenly they're not there.
Right.
And suddenly I've got to navigate Houston, Texas.
Right.
And if you live in Houston, you can't walk anywhere.
Right.
You can't even walk to the end of your street. And it's a total car culture, and it's a very confusing city. Everything looks the same. It's all strip malls. And more so now than ever. Right. But yeah, I remember that I was trying to find Vinyl Edge and could not figure out where the heck it was.
Right.
I was just driving in circles around that part of, I think, 1960, and I didn't realize. I think it's on Stubner, or was on Stubner.
Right.
And yeah, just driving in circles forever, trying to figure out where the hell, this record store I'd been to, my mommy had taken me to, however many times, where it actually was.
We were talking about earlier, you were sort of the guy in high school that would carry around the video camera. Then, our friend was when you graduated. And then eventually I was, and my brother was a freshman when I was a senior. And I remember, just driving around in the car and, taping stuff out the window and, making commentary. And there's a lot of things, going back, it's been a while since I've been back. But, I think I still have the muscle memory probably of the turns in the road, on the street up to our high school. There's just certain things that this just couldn't be in there. So it was a nice way to end the movie.
Yeah, it was.
Everybody go see it.
Everyone see it. All right. Well, that's it for this installment. I think we're going to try and do another one of these on high school movies.
Sounds good to me.
I'm not sure what the theme will be there aside from high school movies, but we'll be back soon with even more excitement. Say goodbye, Laura.
Goodbye, Laura.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. I've been your host, Ryan Steens. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.